This is Sammy Ash and Justin Titus here, and we are going to talk to you about how the mainstream of color television affected the culture in 1960 to 1981.
You're listening to WJHS 91.5 The Eagle. Welcome to Media in the Making, a podcast where we look at the evolution of media from 1600 all the way to present day 2022. In this podcast series, we ask, how have different forms of media evolved and changed culture? Media in the Making, where media and culture are always changing. Now, let's take a step back into time.
Our timeline is going to be 1961 to 1980. We're going to be talking about how color TV became mainstream. The first step to make the color TV mainstream was the premiere of Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color in September 1961. It created a turning point that persuaded consumers to go out and purchase the color television. Now we are going to listen to the audio of the first ever color broadcast on March 13th, 1967.
And by the way, Bob, don't you think it's about time for you to move into your new color set?
Well, I have one more question that maybe you can answer while I'm on my way down the studio to the new set. Just what will this change mean to the Channel 2 viewers who will still be watching us in black and white?
Well, we think you'll see a big difference on black and white receivers. The new color cameras will give an improved monochrome picture, and all our new color sets here in the studio were designed with that in mind.
Well, Doug, first I'd like to say this, that I feel doubly honored to have been chosen to be the first one involved in our big change, because there are so many much more colorful characters around here than this reporter. In the news tonight, Governor Hughes has raised doubts about Dubuque's financial flood dilemma. We'll have the story right after this message for Standard Oil.
Watching TV in color now is so much more detailed than it was in 1960 to 1981. Now we can see all the details, emotions, and environments all over the world.
I personally saw a clip of Will Chamberlain. He's a famous basketball player and a Hall of Famer, one of the best to ever do it, playing in the 60s. And back then it was black and white, but they somehow managed to put the clip in color and HD. When it was aired, it was obviously in bad quality. Like I said before, it was black and white. And then when I compare it when they put in color and HD, it's crazy. When we were researching this, we had no idea how much better today's TV was than back then in the black and white era. Imagine watching, let's say, the Olympics back then versus now. Back then, it was terrible quality, black and white, you can barely know what's going on. But now we can see the motions and details of these world-class athletes after winning and representing their countries.
Now let's get into the timeline on how the color TV became mainstream. But first, we would like to shout out Sam Eberle's and James Getz' podcast. They are doing the era 1940 to 1960. They are talking about the timeline of the invention of the TV. We are doing something similar with TV, but we are talking about the evolution of color TV and how it became mainstream.
In 1937, a Scottish engineer, John Logie Baird, invented the oldest color television in the world. In the 50s, the general public was introduced to color television for the very first time. In 1954, on New Year's Day, NBC made a live in color telecast of the New Year's parade. Only a few thousand people saw live and in color, but as shown before, the first American color broadcast was on March 13th, 1967.
The first person to ever be in a color TV broadcast was reporter Robert Brunner. Color broadcasts from the United States were available to Canadian population centers near the border since the mid-1950s.
At the time that NTSC color broadcasting was officially introduced into Canada was in 1966, but it wasn't until 1977 to 1980 when the color TV became quote-unquote mainstream because most of America had it.
Color TV transformed the way America saw the world and the world saw America. That is the answer to the driving question. How did media affect culture in our era?
Color television was one of the most complex and transformative technological innovations of its time, symbolizing a unique and thoroughly modern form of seeing and representing. It was in fact often discussed as a way of seeing the world in a spectacular form of live in color. This is Sammy Ash and Justin Titus. Thank you for listening.
Media in the Making is brought to you by WJHS 91.5 and the Eagle Tech Academy Mass Media classes. Media in the Making, teaching you about the evolution of media throughout history and its effects on culture. For more from Now the Students, the podcast series is on the 91.5 website. WJHS 915.org thanks you for joining us.